Well, it's Saturday. You can see how the trees are drooping. Everything's misted over with ice. And we've got a half an inch of ice in the driveway. They said there wasn't going to be no ice buildup, but I guess that meant somewhere else because it didn't mean it here. I had the truck out before, so some of the snow's off of it, but the car's definitely got the big thick coating of ice on it. So anyway, hard to walk on this. Bullseye will be sliding all over the place when I take him for his walk, I guess. What a crummy day this one turned out to be. Hey YouTube. The other day someone had asked me about a coal stove and how it works compared to a wood stove, you know, as far as the time factor of burning and stuff. Now, I'm up at the house here working, so, you know, don't mind the dirt that's around here. And I'm not cleaning that up, plus trying to build the house at the same time. I'll just clean it up every now and then, and I just have a pile of wood laying next to the stove. But here's the thing. This is a coal stove. And the basic setup on a coal stove, and I'll start at the top here, is you have a damper. Now this is a manual flap damper. So inside there's a round plate with some holes in it that when you turn that handle flat ways, okay, right now it's open. When you turn it flat ways, the damper goes across the pipe and it slows down the amount of air being pulled through the pipe from the stove out to the outside. So that's one part of it. Now, I'll give you the simple parts, then I'll tell you some other things that happen. So anyway, you have the basic stove here. You know, pretty much all stoves are built alike. This particular stove is not double wall. In other words, there's no way to get the air between the stove itself and the outside of what you're looking at. So there's no blower on this stove. This stove, if you need a blower on it, you have to set the blower on top of the stove or possibly behind it. But for right now, I'm not worried about that because the stove seems to be doing a pretty good job. So then you have the main door of the stove, and the stove is mainly steel. It's like, I don't know, 3/8 inch steel, I would assume, maybe 1/4 inch here and there. And then you have the door. This door has a glass in it, but you can see, even though the fire's there, and I've seen very few stoves in my life that actually the window stays nice. The glass usually gets either sooted up from wood soot or you know, creosote, or it also gets ashes on it when you go to shake the stove if you're using coal. So anyway, then they have a spring handle there. What's nice about this is no matter how hot, now the handle's sort of hot there, but the spring always stays cool. It's actually cold to the touch. So this works pretty nice. It's nice and strong. I lean on it every time I go to get up. This brand of stove is called Gibraltar. I don't think they make this stove anymore from what I remember, but I have 3 of them and I really do like them. Over the years that I built houses, I put many stoves and fireplaces in houses. And these stoves, I was really impressed with these stoves because of how they were built and how they worked and the longevity of them. You know, they last for what seems forever. This stove here, I bought this stove used from somebody, I think, in southern PA. A lot of people buy stoves, and when they see the work that's involved with them and they don't know how to set themselves up properly, they end up getting rid of them. So I buy them. Whenever I see one, I try to buy it. But this stove new was probably, I don't know, maybe $1,000 or so. Used, I bought this stove for $200. And when I bought it for $200, I was amazed because the grates in it were like brand new, so they hardly ever used the stove. But they left the stove on the outside get sort of rusty. So all I did was either sandblast it or sand it, and then I painted it. So then the bottom door that you have here is the door that has the damper on it. So the way this works is when you slide this side to side, it opens up these holes, and you can see the fire's getting hotter there just by opening the door. but you don't want to run a stove with the door open because it's not designed to have that much air going through. You can do it, but the stove will get overheated too quickly. Even with this all the way open and with a good draft outside or a wind, you could have some problem with the stove overheating. So I normally run this stove like this, and what we do is we call that the size of a pea. We leave the hole in there the size of a pea. You can see it on this one here, or less. Okay, at nighttime, half a pea. All right, so normally it's about a pea during the day. At nighttime, we'll go down to a half a pea. And the reason for that is during the day you have a little bit more heat in the house. At nighttime, you normally don't. Now, this stove here doesn't have a plate, or does it? Yeah, there's a plate under there to keep the heat from hitting the floor. If you were going to set this on a metal plate or something, so there's not a lot of heat transfer. So it's actually pretty cool underneath there. And this one has legs. Now the legs aren't adjustable, although inside these, and you can see what the legs look like. I believe inside the angle there of the leg, inside, from the inside, you could put bolts in there if you wanted to adjust it. And the stove really should sit flat, because from opening and closing it and shaking it and stuff, it ends up where the stove sometimes moves, and you want to watch that. So sometimes I'll shim them with something, maybe some copper shim that'll hold still, but you're better off having something dead level to set it on, okay? But you know how things go, sometimes it just doesn't happen. So anyway, those are the basic parts of the stove. Now on the stoves they have today, on the back wall there's also a heat shield. You can see this one here. Now this heat shield's fairly warm here. That's not as working as well as the one that, you know, is down underneath the stove. So we're only going to talk about the stove today. Sometime later I'll talk to you about how and why I built what I built here and why it's doing what it's doing. So anyway, then with the stove comes a handle, okay, and you don't want to lose these handles because they're hard to come by sometimes, especially to fit your stove, but this fits on the grates of the stove. So what you have there is right here, okay, you see that? Your handle goes on there and you shake it back and forth, and you can see it knocking down some sparks in that, which you don't have to do right now. This fire is burning way hot enough. But you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grates in there. And the grates run from front to the back of the stove. That's why I like this stove. Now, there's a lot of different things you can do with a stove. And the reason I like, let me just not do with the stove, but there's a lot of different things you can get from different stoves. Now the reason I like this front to back grate is you can see the stove's not that wide. That might be 14 inches or so. But what's nice about those grates is that you can pile that thing with coal in there, probably 8 to 10 inches of coal, and no matter how much weight you can fit in there, it's not going to bend the grates, you know, depending upon how hot they get. Now if your stove is way overheated and the grates are cherry red, and not that they don't get red, because sometimes they do, but if they're that red, they're gonna either warp, crack, or bend, depending upon how hot you let this thing get. So they make, the one drawback of these stoves is that you have to open it to shake it, which gets, you know, this dust everywhere, and then you have to empty the pan once a day. When I was a kid, we had stoves that you emptied the stove like every 2 or 3 days. This is a little bit of a nuisance to have to empty it every day, because you're kind of tied to it. It's not like where you can, you know, just throw 2 or 3 shovels of coal on it, dampen it, and go to work. You have to have a regimen of doing things. So if you're the kind of person that's not reliable, you really shouldn't have a coal stove in the house, because for one thing, a coal stove can look innocent when you put the coal on it. You can forget to shut the damper, and in an hour's time that thing can be so red hot it isn't even funny, you know, and the house could burn down from that. So the one thing about having a stove, and that goes for wood as well, is that you need to be reliable, and you need to, nothing else can distract you from the stove. not some kids crying or or animals needing to go out or whatever. You need to make sure that this stove is on your mind, okay? Because if you don't dampen it when the stove is ready to be dampened, and if you go somewhere or you forget and you're outside, even if you're outside talking to someone, or you're, you went outside and you're emptying the garbage and maybe a neighbor stopped you or whatever, you can get in a lot of trouble with a coal stove very quickly. So, and years ago people knew that. It seems nowadays people are not quite up on, how important it is to watch the stove. So anyway, those are the parts of the stove. Now what I was going to say is the drawback on this stove is that you have to open the door and shake it. Now I say drawback, but really stoves have been built like that. Thousands and thousands, if not millions of stoves, coal stoves with a grate, were built that you opened the door to shake the ashes down. And technically, opening the door and shaking the grate allows you to see what's happening inside. Because if you're dropping whole coal that are red down into the ash pan, you're only killing your fire. You only want to shake it very few times to get the ashes out that have already burned up. So what happens with me in the morning, or my wife, when we shake the stove, and that's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning, is you shake the stove. You get the ashes out that have burned up through the night so that the black coal that's on the top of the fire can go ahead and get itself hot, to warm things up for you in the morning. Anyway, what I was going to say, there's a stove made that has a handle on the outside here, and you shake it back and forth, and you don't have to open the door. Granted, you don't get as much dirt, on a daily basis coming into the room, but you can, as long as you're clean and neat, you can take care of it. It's not that much. It just it can get to be too much if you don't clean up every day. But anyway, if you shake the shaker back and forth, the problem with that is you're not looking at what's happening with the coal. So you're assuming that it needs 1 shake, 2 shakes, when it might need 4 shakes. It all depends on what the fire looks like. Having a coal fire burn, like I can start a fire in October and never have it go out for the whole winter. But when my wife first started using a coal stove, when we first got married, she didn't understand, that you have to go after the stove on a regular basis. Sometimes when she's cooking, she'll even forget it. If she's making, something that's taking up all of her time, she might forget the stove, but you can't. That's why the old saying, keep the home fires burning, is what they were talking about. Watch the stove, keep things the way they should be. So anyway, we've come to the point in our life where that's something that we do. And a lot of the things we do are all repetitious. Every day we do the same chores. A stove can be a big chore. Now for this stove, if you only burn coal, well then you can buy coal, have somebody deliver it if you want into a bin or whatever you want to, go from there. Sometimes, like between us and town, there's a coal yard, so I can actually drive my truck into town and on the way back get a half a ton of coal. And if I park it in the garage, I don't even have to unload the truck. I just take it off the truck. But normally I don't do that. I have a coal bin that holds 3 tons. 3 tons will more than get me through a winter, with the fire that's in the house. Now if I use this stove, the one in the garage and the one in the house, with coal, then I'd have to get, more coal. But I burn wood, sometimes coal in here, like at nighttime, like I have a bucket here with half a bucket of coal. That's more than enough coal to keep this stove burning overnight until I can get up here the next day. So what happens is, like last night I fixed this stove at 6 p.m. okay, and I did not come back here until 10:30 this morning, and the stove was nice. It was warm in here. The stove needed to be shook and the fire needed to be, add some coal to it, but it's got a good red bed of coals. So then that's when I transfer, instead of from coal, I use wood. So then I'll take the wood and throw it in there, and then I'll just nurse it during the day. This stove has a very small firebox in it, so 3 pieces of this wood, and it can't be like this is a pretty big one here. It has to be more like the smaller ones. like even this one. 3 of them fill that thing up. So it's not like you can fill it and come back, you know, at the end of the day, because usually it'll burn up. But now the good thing about this stove in this house is that the chimney is really tall. So it's a 2-story house, plus there's probably 8 feet of chimney from the ceiling level up outside. What's nice about that is you get a real good draft, a strong draft. If you're in a ranch house and your chimney just barely goes through the roof, or it's, you know, 2 feet above the roof, you don't get a strong draft. Now what that draft is think of a vacuum pulling air through these grates, through the fire, which help oxygen is what's needed in the fire to keep it burning, and then out through the stovepipe. The greater the pressure is, the more you can adjust it. In other words, you can flatten this flapper out totally flat with good draft, and you can also close this one to almost closed, like half a P, and that fire will burn for like 16 hours full of coal. And this firebox, like I say, is so small that it uses about 1/3 of a bucket of coal to fill the box totally full. And when I say totally full with this particular stove, there's a metal plate in here that's right to the top of that. So the coal will be all the way to the top of that from where the grates are, and the grates are down in here. Okay, so you're looking at, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 inches of coal in there. And that will burn, like I say, all night without a problem. And tomorrow morning you could, you know, if you were living here with this, and I know because of the house, the stove we have in the house, in the morning you just open the damper up and that thing will start to get red, and once it turns red, that's when you add coal. Once it turns blue to flames, that's when you want to close the damper a little bit. You never want to close the damper totally on coal. If you know, a 45 is better. But this one down here you can close almost to the size of, like I say, a pea or so, and it'll keep the house between 65 and 70. And we're satisfied pretty much with that. Now I would recommend that you always get a stove bigger than what you actually need. I designed a spreadsheet that figures out the BTUs of heat needed for any house. You got to enter the information about doors, windows, insulation and stuff, and the size of the rooms. And this stove is actually a little small for this house, and it's okay because the rooms that are in here have taken up so much space that there's not a lot of room for this stove. But nonetheless, it'll supplement the heat if nothing else. And if worse comes to worse, with this flat top stove, you can actually cook on that thing. You could bake a pizza on there if you have a cover for the top of it, and we've done that already, not on this particular stove, but on other stoves that we've had when power went out and stuff. And you can, you know, you can keep a hot water kettle on there all the time. It depends on, you know, what you want to do with this stove. So anyway, that's right now that's the description of a basic coal stove. Oh, the other thing, I don't know if we can see it in here, is that this stove, yeah, you can't really see it, I'll show it to you later, is lined with fire brick. And normally, as long as you don't overheat the stove, those fire brick might last you like 5 years or so. But normally, sometimes, you know, when it's really cold out, the stove will be running pretty hard. You might have to replace a brick or two here or there. They're not hard to replace on most stoves because the holder that holds the brick in is usually a metal plate designed to just hug the brick and keep it in place along the back of the stove. So yeah, that's all there is to a coal stove. Now the next time I make a video about this, what I'll do is explain how to get the fire going and how to really use coal. Guys, I hope that you find this interesting, and if you want me to finish this video, just leave me a little comment and I will finish it as far as how the coal goes. If it doesn't really interest you, maybe you want to leave the comment and then I won't finish it. It depends on how many comments I get. But anyway, that's just, you know, a coal stove and all the parts that go with it. And sometimes they're shaped differently. Like you can have a stove shaped more like a drum. There's one like square one, used to be called Warm Morning. I thought they made a pretty nice stove. There's a lot of companies who were, and foundries from the 20s and 30s and 40s who made stoves who are out of business now. I mean, I think we made some great stoves in this country at one time, and we had some foundries everywhere. Nowadays, people don't even know what a foundry is. When I went to school, they actually taught you, and I took the academic course, you know, bound for college. I wasn't heading for construction work, actually. So when I took the academic course, even in that course, foundry and how to use a foundry and how to pour metal was part of the curriculum in shop class. Now, unfortunately, our kids don't get that. They get how to bake cookies that are freaking made at the store. It's a shame. But anyway, I'll go on with this thing at another time. Have a good one, guys.